Well, welcome Prescott, and welcome to Prescott E-News Prescott Talk Show. My name's Glenn Martin, and I'm your host. And it's getting really nice outside. I love the last part
Finally.
of September. It's a little warm during the day, but we're having really nice evenings, and the smoke has kind of receded a little bit. So I'm enjoying our days. But today we're going to go not in the Prescott area, but we're going over the mountain. And I have as my guest today Donna Michaels, who is running for Board of Supervisors, District 3.
Yep.
Welcome, Donna. Welcome
Thank you.
to the show.
Pleasure to be here. This is
Yeah, it's kind of fun to drive all the way over here to the studio.
It is. It was a beautiful drive, and you're right. The weather is just spectacular now. We need to be outdoors instead of doing this, but
I'm telling
let's
you,
do that right after.
Yeah, exactly. We'll go ride a horse or something.
There you
right?
go. I've
I
got
know
one
you're
to
a horse.
ride.
I saw your pictures of you riding your
That's
horse.
right.
So,
That's right.
Anyway, Donna, let's talk about you a little bit. What's your history? Where have you been? What you've done?
Sure. Well, I've been here for 30 years, and I suppose that really is the starting point of this journey that has led me to this moment with you, Glenn, because I fell in love with the Verde Valley as a result of coming here not long after I completed my doctoral work in policy planning, by the way, out of Miami, and to bring the kids voting program, which, as you may know, is the home, Mesa is the home of it for the '92 presidential election. And so bought that license, took it to Florida because there's a real need for civic literacy, not only in Florida, as we all know, but across this country. It's in many reasons why we are where we're at today. The civic literacy interest has gone way down, but I see it going up now of necessity, and that's a good thing. So I came here and finished my business down in Mesa, and thought when I landed over Phoenix, being a Virginia girl, I was born in Virginia, Alexandria, Virginia, that it was really sad to see no trees. And I thought, oh, poor Arizona, they don't have any trees here. And, they took pity on me.
Well, we have cactus.
So I said, what is that? And they recommended that before I go back to Florida to bring the license for kids voting, I might do myself a favor and drive up to the Verde Valley. Didn't know at that time that there are 8 ecosystems in our great state of Arizona, but had the time to experience all of them while I was here on that visit. And the rest is history. I said, I know exactly where I'm going to be the moment I can. And it was actually months. I had already kind of ensconced because I was scouting around for where one could have a standalone institute to study issues of, if you're a policy person, important, whether it's nutrition or education or healthcare or land use or development. How can we come together and begin a trainers program, if you will, to reach out to especially rural communities, which has always been near and dear to my heart. But I never looked back, and I fell in love in a way that I never, frankly, imagined I could have. I learned to drive my first truck.
Big old 4x4.
I tell you what, it was a 250, which I still have today, not that same one, but an updated model, '06 now. And a diesel, and it can get up a 6% grade just with a fully loaded horse trailer, which I also learned to haul when I first moved here. I became from a vegetarian, a little side story, to a big game hunter, which I very much enjoy. So you can see that
That is a jump.
It is a huge leap, and one I'm very grateful for. I didn't know a thing. Let me just put it that way. I thought, well, I finished my doctoral work, I'm published, I teach, I know it. And then I came to rural Arizona and started my education all over again. And because of the wonderful people here, I learned how to step off a sidewalk, put my boots on, and become real in a way that I never knew or imagined was possible for me. And I owe a great debt. I owe a great debt to this state and to Yavapai County in particular, because it taught me everything that has made me want to come to this office to protect.
Yeah.
So that's the short version.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting that you talk about our ecosystems because it is so diverse. I mean, we go down south, it's desert fact, my friend Joe, who's watching this show right now, we were talking about, the desert of Yuma and through Phoenix, but you go a little bit higher, Prescott, where we're right on the verge of mountains and still a little bit deserty. And you get into Flagstaff, and then the White Mountains are beautiful, and Greer.
Who knew?
So it's so nice. I mean, there's so many places to visit. Prescott is a beautiful town.
It is
and
indeed.
Arizona is an awesome state to live in.
It is.
So,
And who knew from that moment that I looked out the window and said, oh, poor Arizona, there are no trees here, to this moment when I recognized that we have it all.
yeah,
We
do.
absolutely,
really
within
do.
an hour and a half, 2 hours, you can be anywhere you want, to do any kind of thing you want outdoors, which is my great love.
Yeah.
And tallest stand of ponderosa pine in North America is an hour and a half away from where I live.
Yeah,
And I haul my horses up there and ride and camp and hunt, and that's how I'm going to spend the rest of my life, in addition to being, hopefully, if I have that great privilege and honor, to be elected supervisor for District 3.
Well, you talk about ecosystems, even here in Yavapai County, we have the ecosystems. You're over
Right.
here in the Prescott area,
Right.
which is, we go down the street, we're in pine trees, and you're in the Verde Valley area. Talk about the geographics of District 3, the district you're running
Sure.
for.
Well, it's High Chaparral. It's central Arizona, of course. And, we have District 3 is an interesting layout from Perkinsville, Jerome, Clarkdale, all of Cottonwood, the village of Oak Creek, all of Sedona, a little tiny bit of Verde Santa Fe, Cottonwood, Cornville area. So it's quite diverse. When you think about coming down from Jerome to where I live, the village of Oak Creek,
Yeah.
we have a great deal of diversity. But, Camp Verde, where I lived my first 12 years, is a fabulous a community to live in. Here we have the Verde River running through it, and I know how much you care about the Verde River and protecting, in our neck of the woods, the headwaters of it.
Sure.
Based on what happens in the Big and Little Chino up here.
What happens there affects all of us.
That's
so,
correct.
Yeah,
That's
absolutely.
correct. How many straws are we going to stick into the ground? And
Right.
we'll talk a little bit about that. But it seems to me that everything that I have done from my travels across the country growing up and having to be a scholarship student, I had to work full-time while I was a scholarship student. Only inherited a work ethic.
Yeah.
So I had to earn the rest, and I'm very proud of that.
So let's kind of get into some of the issues that are going on. And
Right.
you brought up your education. You have your doctorate.
I do.
And so there's a couple initiatives that are going on in Arizona right now. And this is going to segue into taxes. We have an initiative, 208, where we're going to fund schools in Arizona from people who make over $250,000 or couples that make over $500,000.
Right.
Your
$35,
view.
I think.
Your view on that?
Yeah. Well, let me say this about that, as the old line
Let me
goes.
see this
first.
about that.
Yeah, exactly. We should be ashamed of ourselves. As a lifelong educator, as someone who's so proud of this state in so very many ways, the fact that we have so little money per student to spend is a travesty. I know teachers who, to this moment, are buying the pencils and the papers that the kids use in the classroom. And there's no way that should be happening in our great state. We've tried lots of ways to remedy that problem, haven't we? From ranking bottom or near bottom for the entire time of my tenure here. We vacillate between the third lowest to the lowest, and it seems to me we need a fix. And I'm tired of seeing the bank account swept every year to go to other things. We know not what sometimes. And putting our kids in education last, because we know this. We know that a well-educated society is a thriving society. You know, I mentioned earlier that I brought kids voting to this state. It's really how I discovered this state. And that program generation came from Puerto Rico. And it came from Puerto Rico because in Puerto Rico, they have a 98% literacy rate. And there's a tie between literacy and effectiveness in a civil society. And so bringing that program from this great state to Florida, where it was sorely needed, and now is needed across the country, it became clear that education was key in every facet of our lives to thrive as a healthy community. So I'm going to support just about anything that gets us anywhere above the bottom 3 tier. And you know, it's not hard for me to understand that folks that are making more than I'll probably ever make or ever have made, and it's not about, oh, they should pay and we shouldn't. You know, what it equates to is a couple that makes $500,000 jointly is going to pay something like $35. And hopefully, as I understand it, will go to classroom. Do I think some of our administrators, and I can read your mind from here, should be getting $500,000? Oh, I could wax on long and hard about that. No, I don't.
You are reading my mind, aren't you?
I am. And it's maybe it comes from a servant's heart that's had to work hard to get everything I have in my life. And a lot of the stuff I've done and what I've been doing in community, no one's paid me a nickel. You do it because it's the right thing to do. And when you enter the field of education, you know you're not going to make $1 billion. And so the disparity between what we pay our teachers and what some of our superintendents and other leadership across the state make in education doesn't square in my heart, nor in the budget, the bottom line of how we should be dividing those funds up in whatever mechanism we use to get it. So the very long way as a policy person is to this short answer. I support it because we need money going to our classrooms. And short of robbing banks, which I'm close to willing to do, at least, you know, in theory, to get more money in the classroom, I think we should do it.
Okay. And so when I talk about the overrides for Prescott Unified School District and Humboldt School District, then you would be for those overrides as well?
Not necessarily. You know, let me say this again. I think we have to do our diligence. I'm a data-driven, evidence-based person. I need to know what the outcome is going to be. Where's the cost? Where's the return on the investment? And we're going to speak about that, I hope, in terms of our Board of Supervisors. Where's the return of our taxpayers' investment in electing the supervisors they have elected, for example? But I don't know the specifics. And so until I know that, no, I'm not going to out of hand support anything. I'm a fiscal conservative, in case you haven't noticed. It's probably one of the reasons that I'm here. So I'd have to have the data that supports the reason for the override. I have supported overrides in the past, but not all of them.
Gotcha.
And I would have to understand fully why we need to do that.
So let's talk about taxes a little bit more. We were
Sure.
we were talking before the show about the 18% tax that was implemented on the property owners of Yavapai County.
Yes.
Your stance on that?
Well, the short answer, and then we'll backfill from there, is I am absolutely opposed to, particularly through the lens of these uncertain times, when we know that we have had the sharpest decline in the GNP since we've been recording it in the history of our country, when we know that people are working hard to stay in their homes, when we know that folks have lost their jobs and are not likely to find them again and are going to have to shift to new ways to support their families, when we know that recidivism is on the way down, when we know, and that's a study, by the way, most recently performed by NAU, when we know that diversion programs are on the way up in this great paradigm shift of our criminal justice system, which as a policy person I fully support. You know, I think we need to address that problem on both ends. Here's the jail, and we need to do prevention and invest in that. That's education, by the way. And we need to do diversion, and that's the components of mental health, behavioral, and substance use or abuse diversion programs. That's where our dollars should be going. It makes no sense for brick and mortar to be funded at the tune of especially 65, 68, who knows what the final cost will be. I've heard $244 million at build out before we have more jail cells to meet the predicted need. Well, the facts don't support that we're going to have the brick and mortar need of jail cells. Should we have been repairing those jail cells the last 20 years? Well, now that's a question that needs, I think, to be asked and answered.
What happened in the past? Well, I was going to bring up the jail a little later on, but as we are on
But
the jail
that's the
now,
18% tax that we're talking about. That's what's causing it at this moment.
part of that also is going to PSPRS.
Good point.
So it's, a large part of it's going towards this new Justice Center that they're building.
Right.
And the other part is going towards PSPRS to pay down the liability, which is a problem all over Arizona in every municipality.
Right.
And we could get really into the weeds with PSPRS, but one of the things at the county level was they were going to put part of that, about $4 million, into the liability to pay that down. But now, the last time I heard, maybe you can correct me on this, they're kind of debating if they're going to put that $4 million extra payment to pay the liability because of the shortfall they're having on taxes. So if we're having a shortfall on taxes now,
what's it going to be? Well, that's exactly what I've heard, and I can only say it is rumor. I haven't had it verified, but that it is in fact going to be swept because of the deficit. We know that the county manager, Phil Borden, has already said we're $6 million short to date, and there's no way in this unknown world that we are presently living in what 2021 will look like, and it just seems ill-advised. To say it's not prudent seems to be an understatement to impose on our taxpayers who are struggling to stay in their homes. And my priority as a citizen, but certainly as a supervisor, whose job it is to protect the health and safety and well-being, meaning how well are we living in our respective communities across this county. And if we're going to burden our taxpayers with an additional increase at that unprecedented increase level, to my knowledge, it's not only unprecedented in this county, Glenn, it's unprecedented across this country. And to do it through these uncertain times seems irresponsible.
My fear, Donna, is next year when we have our property tax over here at the the bidding wars, as I call them, the auction. What's that going to look like? Because there's a lot of families who are struggling to make ends meet. We've been hit economically hard all over America, and even here in Yavapai County. A lot of the business owners, I go down, I was to walk in the business area last night and the empty buildings. I was talking with Councilman Phil Good, and he pointed out 26 businesses that have closed since COVID. So, we know the burden is there on the people who own businesses and the people who work for those businesses to survive, and then we throw another 18% on top of them. Sometimes I question the morality of it almost,
It is immoral to even think about, and from my perspective. And it seems to me that the job of elected officials, not only in Yavapai County but across the state, and I try very hard to stay focused on what is the purview of a supervisor at all times, but it seems to me that we have an opportunity to take this bully pulpit and find ways, whether it's forgiveness or postponement of our taxes, whether it is finding dollars, whether through CARES or other kinds of reauthorization of dollars as a result of this pandemic from the feds, to go to our businesses. Why aren't we talked about diversion programs. I'd like to divert some of that money, and I've said it before, from the projected 65, 68 million, whatever the ultimate figure is, to our small businesses, to our farmers, our ranchers, those that are actually, and always have been, the backbone of our economy in this county. Do not desert them in our time of need. Let's help them survive COVID and then thrive past it. And the only way that's going to happen is if we roll up our sleeves and say, where are we going to cut And where are the opportunities to reallocate, to realign dollars? And we need to be at the business of doing that.
Yeah, well, we talk about the jail, 63 or 65 million dollar was the bond.
Right. The loan.
But the loan, but that does not count the debt that's going to occur, and I think that was right around 89 million.
Right.
And that's going to build the first pod of this Justice Center. Now, that does not include the staffing.
Right.
Does not include the PSPRS for the staffing.
Right.
It does not include any of the maintenance. So, I mean, it's an open-ended check during a time when we really don't know what holds the future. I'm like looking at 2021 with like,
Right.
I don't
So,
want to.
I would.
Do I really want to see this come about? We
Right.
hadn't had a real good 2020. So
here's a let's bring it down to how all of us live. You and I are citizens. Whatever are other official roles, you as an interviewer for this fine program, and me as a candidate presently for an elected position, first and foremost, we're homeowners, we're citizens, we're neighbors, and as much as I'd like to maybe replace that '06 truck that I have, it's near and dear to my heart, and it's taken me on a lot of great hunting trips and riding trips, but I considered that maybe last year, and I'm not going to be doing that with the family budget.
Well,
and so how is it any
yeah.
different for us as elected officials? Shouldn't we approach our budget with the same kind of concern and stewardship we do when we go home with ours?
Exactly. We're sitting here at the table. We make up our budgets and we structure our lives around what we have. And it seems that government always, if they can't make their budget, they turn to the ATMs, what I call them. And the ATMs are us.
That's exactly right.
We are the ATMs.
And if ever there was a time to model not doing that, and to really, for Yavapai County to really emerge as a model for other supervisors across this country, and I challenge us to be that. What are the ways that we can say, for example, you have to have, Glenn, I'm sure you know this and many others do too, a minimum of 5 acres in constant and permanent production in order to receive any tax benefit. But yet we know this, that many in our Verde Valley area, in particular that Verde Valley region, the Middle Verde, which we're going to talk about in a minute with the Verde Connect, that 600 acres of riparian area where most or much of our food, our produce is grown, do that on 1, 2, 3, and 4 acres. They get no tax incentives. So, how can we look at that in a different light, especially during these times, and say, what is it we could do? What are the loans? What are the forgivable grants? What is it that we should and could be doing as responsible government to make sure that they not only hang on, but they are positioned to thrive through this time that we're all facing right now?
We talked a little bit about PSPRS. What's your idea to solve that issue? Because it's going to be PSPRS hit Prescott. It's going to hit Central Yavapai Fire.
Yes.
There's a lot of municipalities. I bring up the word Bisbee, who's failing at this point. They can't raise taxes anymore. I think they're over 10%.
Oh my, yeah.
Tucson, South Tucson's the next one that's about ready to fall. They're not getting the return that they were supposed to, and there's a lot of people that deserve and earned that retirement.
Right.
How are we going to fulfill that requirement at the county level?
I think we need to do some reallocation. And, why in the world we'd go out and get, and no one has a crystal ball, and I respect and understand that things occur and they're out of our hands, and certainly the pandemic, this virus that we're all having to readjust to is an example of that. But that doesn't mean that we then keep the blinders on and say, well, we just must headlong go forward with spend, because we made that commitment how many years ago?
Yeah.
And if we now have a bond and some of it is in our bank and we know we can't give it back, perhaps we can find a way, and I believe that there always is. I haven't entered a contract that didn't have an escape clause, for extraordinary circumstances. And I would say to you, whatever the money is that is in that pool this moment ought to go directly to wiping out the debt and helping our families and small businesses, and looking at what are the infrastructure needs that are critically necessary this moment. And let's get through this time together like any household would. Let's tighten our belts, let's shift, reallocate, and not spend it on that new truck I was just describing. And it's a Ford 150 that I want. Yeah.
The Taj Mahal Justice Center.
As many have described it. And, you know, to Sheriff Masher's credit, I have to tell you that I spent a couple hours with him, learned a lot. I have a great deal of respect for who he is and what he has done, and wish him well in his retirement, and think that he led a wonderful vision that is about the criminal justice paradigm shift, and I applaud him for that. That has nothing to do with the environment that we find ourselves in financially right now, and to execute it right now. You know, if I lost my job and I just had my heart set on buying that truck I keep referring to, I'd say, well, Donna, you're going to have to put that on hold, aren't you? And that's what we need to do until we make sure, one, that all the monies are responsibly accounted for and explained to a community that then can decide whether they want it or not, and where they want it, and in what manner they want it. Meantime, with that pool of funds that I just mentioned that we have already received, let's divert it to what we need it for. We're going to have to pay it back anyway, and take care of some of the business at hand, like our pension system.
So I keep on going back to the jail. It's because it is
hard not to. It's
such a hard subject not to avoid.
It's a hot topic right now.
When I have a lot of respect for Sheriff Masher.
Sure,
He's done
we
a
all
great
do,
job.
of course.
I don't agree with everything that he said. And Sheriff's watching me right now. I'm, go back and forth. But I have a high respect for him. And I appreciate what he's done for our county. And I do wish him very well in his retirement. But he's saying that we need to have a new jail. So what do we do? I mean, I understand when the sheriff's saying, look, we got to do something about this overcrowding. What is your answer to that besides building the jail? How are we going to fix that?
Well, the Chin report pointed that out, and I know you know about it. And I think that alternatives could have been considered, should absolutely now of necessity be considered. And we need to roll up our sleeves and say, all right, 20 years of disrepair. We don't have 68, 65, whatever the figure is, to mitigate the 20 years of disrepair that jail has suffered. What are the other ways we can mitigate minimally, just like we all do at home, that will keep it safe for the moment, for the time being, and then let's put it back on the table and look at it through a new lens of where is the best place for it. I've heard from many Prescott residents. As a supervisor, I care about this entire county, and I'll say to you, Glenn, I felt the same way when I served on the college board. One, I didn't look at any one of my trustees and say, by the way, what party are you in?
Right.
I rolled up my sleeves and said, how can we best serve the educational needs of our constituents in this 8,000 square mile county? That's exactly how I feel about the role of supervisor. So, I feel strongly that there are solutions here, and we simply need to put down the partisan politics rhetoric. We simply need to say we understand that there is a need, but we need to address it in a way that's going to be most effective given the environment we find ourselves in right now. Same with on the other side of the mountain with the justice system there. Perhaps we need to look at what are the best ways to allocate the dollars for diversion and prevention. And I'm mighty worried when I hear that Governor Ducey is looking to close our prison system in Florence. And it makes me ask the question, is that what is the connection between that potential and this extraordinary expenditure of dollars, particularly in the times we find ourselves in? And I think we need to look at that and answer that question.
And another thing I look at also, and I'm glad you brought up Governor Ducey closing down Florence, but when you have a jail in an area, you're bringing all the the offenders to one place.
Right.
And I'm not saying, you know, there's people that need to be in jail. Don't
Absolutely. Let's get rid of the
I
bad
mean,
guys. Yes.
bad guys need to be locked up, you know.
Right.
But I also know the prison system is when you served your time being there, you get kicked out and you go into that community. So my question is, what do you think of the location that they're going to put this jail in, which is 2 miles away from the lakes? It's in the center of a residential area, within 2 miles one way or another. Walmart, and then you have the beginning of the Peavine Trail right there.
That's a good question, and
we really have to think again when we talk about location. We have to think out the possibilities, because I live in Prescott. I understand what Granite Creek is like,
and we should about Watson Lake as well.
And so when you're releasing these people who may have addiction problems, and I'm not saying, you know, we need to help those people, but not everybody wants the help. They have mental problems, but everybody doesn't want to have that help as well. We're releasing them into the Peavine Trail area, up in the rocks. I mean, there's all kinds of things that could go south.
I hear you. I hear you. So a little bit of background. I am a nationally certified hearing official. One of the few in the state, as a matter of fact. So I appreciate, with a great respect, due process. You know, it's a 65-hour journey of education above your PhD, and 3 years of practicum and then ongoing study to be a hearing official. And so I hold dear to my heart due process. And I want everyone to have that. And if due process has landed someone as a result of that in a jail, then that's where they need to be. And here's what I understand about the history of this location. That was talked about some 20 years ago. And your community's changed. And so it seems to me, based on 2, as I am told, opportunities for the community to vote on it, both times voted it down, that part of it, a good deal of it, was the location. So as a supervisor, it's my job to say, what is it that matters to you? Or what is it that's bothering you right now about this? And then let's talk about it. And do more than talk about it. Look at how we mitigate that. Is the location, just as you said, the right place now? You know, I also understand that as a result of the NEPA assessment, that's why I mentioned Watson Lake, there's potential for whatever's buried down there that hasn't been removed. Environmentally, we perhaps need to find that out before we do anything with it, because that leaches into Watson Lake. So there are a lot of matters that, whether you like it or not, the job of a supervisor is to study things. And I come prepared to do that, and it needs to be studied.
You know, I wasn't here for the first vote. I was here for the second vote on the jail. And a lot of it was, and I get into conversation with people who are for it, saying, well, that really wasn't voting if we should have it or not. It's just how we're going to fund it. My belief is, if anybody believes, no, don't tax me on my sales tax, go ahead and tax me on my property, when they voted it down, I'm thinking there's not very much reality there. Why isn't there, has there never been a vote up or down, a clean vote? Do you want it, don't you want it? Number one. And number two is, when they borrowed the money, why didn't they go with the general obligation fund that would take a taxpayer vote to secure the funds? It seems that they've taken the voters out of the all the equation, and they're saying, you know, and again, I'm not debating Sheriff Masher. He needs help in something.
It's a whole different thing.
But that's a whole different side. But the voters are, you know, out there saying, some are saying, yeah, we need it, others aren't. Why don't we listen to them?
That's a very good question. It's why I'm running. Don't you think it's time? And I love this quote, and it doesn't matter what party you are aligned with. About 1938, I think, and I'm going to paraphrase because I'll butcher it otherwise if I try to do a direct quote. But, you know, it was Roosevelt who said, you know, the government is not this alien thing out there. It's not the president It's not, the senators. It's we the people. And where along the way have we in Yavapai County forgotten that? I'll tell you where. Right on the local level. And that's where government plays the most important role.
Absolutely.
And it's we the people that play that role. And it is why I'm running. And that equation, that variable in the equation, must be put back in. And I'll work very hard to see to that.
And as long as we're quoting great presidents, my favorite president, Ronald Reagan, hi, I'm here from the government and I'm here to help. The most scariest words you could ever hear. So, but you're absolutely right. Our world, our politics start at the local level.
That's right.
We can watch the federal level and we can vote at that, but this is where it impacts us. So,
That's right.
And that's why I do the show, quite honestly. I mean,
And thank you for that.
because we want to get candidates out and let the folks hear you,
Right.
not me, and let you talk to your issues, your platform, so they have a educated vote when they go into the box and say, I want to vote for this person or this person.
So we know that the jail requires, it's legislated. There are statutory requirements about the state of the jail and the size of the jail. All of that aside, I agree with you that if it's all cobbled together that the voters don't really have any say, that it's all decided in an insular fashion, then it's not good governance. It's just no other way to interpret it. And I'll tell you one more thing while we're on the subject. This whole notion that the board should resolve into the jail district, I find disturbing. And I'm going to speak to that about water too, because it should be an independent. I don't care whether it's a paid or volunteer, but it certainly should be qualified and independent. To resolve into a board from a Board of Supervisors is worrisome to me. And I think good stewardship and good governance suggests that the best way to do that is to make it an independent body. And I would look at that very closely.
It reminds me of Green Acres, when Sam Ducker would say, hang on, I'm Western Union, and come up with a Western Union hat, and they go, no, now I'm a salesman.
That's exactly
right.
right.
I mean, it's kind of like that. They adjourn out of the jail board district into regular session. I'm like, wait a minute.
Why do you think we have independent studies?
What just happened?
Right. I'm a critical thinker and science-driven, and when I have people read my research, I make sure it's not me reading it saying, well, that sounds pretty good, Donna. Good job. We need an independent body to do that.
We could go on and on about the
We
jail.
could.
I mean, we could do a whole show on it probably.
Yes.
But the last thought, and this one kind of hits me on a home basis.
Sure.
I was, for 2 years, I was the chairman of the Sober Home Committee for Prescott under Harry Oberg. And we brought some real change into our sober homes that were taking over our town. There were over 200 of them, uncontrolled, and we were able to modify and put standards in them.
Right.
When those standards happen, a lot of them closed down because they were basically there for the money,
Sure.
not for much for the patient.
Right.
When we bring a jail into the town, we're going to bring in more people who are addicted, and I'm not saying that they don't deserve to be in rehabilitation if they deserve
Sure.
it.
Right.
We're going to bring in these mental institutions, or where they're going to get help. Is that good for a community the size of Prescott, do you think?
So it's a great question, and here's how I feel about it. It brings home something that's near and dear to my heart, and another important reason on why I'm running. We need to listen to our community plans. We need to represent our community's vision for itself. Mm-hmm. A wise person told me this, and I've taken it for my own. A supervisor's job, pretty easy to understand. It's hard to do, pretty easy to understand. And it is simply this, that every community, Glenn, has a right to create its own sense of place. My job as a supervisor is to protect it. And so you have to answer your own question. Is that what you want for your community? And if it's not, my job is to protect what it is you do want. And it's not a zero-sum game. We just have to have the will to work it out and find the capacity in which to do that. And so whether it should be in town is a question that must be answered by the residents. And the supervisor must respect that and then look at options accordingly.
Let's go into 3 points that you put in some of your lecture or your material that I was able to read.
Sure.
And one of them was public health. So my question is, we're battling this COVID thing.
Yes.
You put on there that you felt that masks were, at that time, should be mandatory. Do you still feel that way?
I do, and let me say why. We don't have a lot of consistent data, do we? So,
Well, that's just it. Masks, some people say they work, others
some
don't.
people say, but a good deal of the research, and now anecdotally, we know, which is why when you go into a hospital, you've just had to deal with that. And I bet you had to even take a COVID test before you got in there. And good, because we know that there are some basic things now. Nothing's foolproof. We must, and we talked about it before we came in to do this taping, how safe we were going to be in this environment, and I thank you for ensuring that. Masks are the one thing that helps us do a couple of important things. Communicate to our fellow citizen that we may not know what's going on with them health-wise, but that we care. And moreover, that if they're asymptomatic transmitter, that I, by wearing a mask, am less likely to get it. There's no sure bets. We know that for sure in this virus in particular. There's everything to learn about it. We don't even know if the vaccine is going to be successful or not. We're going to have to study that. But it is my opinion that particularly as an elected official that has in the wording on their website homepage the responsibility of protecting the health and safety of the residents of Yavapai County, that I have to forget about a popularity contest and instead do the right thing, which is based on the science right now, and we'll change it when the science tells us to, we need to wear masks. And if we all do it together, the time period that we have to do it is likely to be shortened. And so I stand by that.
So how far would you go to enforce that? I mean, are you asking the sheriff to enforce it or your community to? I mean, how do you do that? And the reason I asked this, Donna, is, again, looking at Facebook, there were 2 cases. One was people singing at a church,
Yes.
weren't wearing a mask, and they
Yes.
were hooked up. They didn't resist. They were hooked up and arrested. Another lady was not wearing a mask, and she was actually tased because she resisted arrest. But they were outside venues and they were socially distanced. So when you say, yeah, we want to regulate masks, how much regulation are we speaking about there?
You know, we talked earlier about prevention instead of trying to do the intervention or the diversion. And here's how I feel about it. If we did good education, if we were successful in a message that was consistent, we would have compliance that would be self-imposed. What has happened as a result of the great confusion in the marketplace is that people don't believe much of anything. They might believe a piece of it, and I think our elected officials have to take responsibility and have a consistent message, and it ought to be about, we invite you to please participate with us as we all are and wear these masks. And we're not going to then get to the point of having to have these conversations.
So that's where it would stop.
That's exactly right.
There would not be any law enforcement ticketing or anything like that. Okay, I just want to make sure it was clear because, again, you know, we live in a crazy world. Crazy things that are going on out there.
We do. Yes.
And you know, we get too much government overreach into our lives.
Right.
It has consequences.
It does.
So,
and when we get too much politicizing of illnesses, it gets too much overreach in arenas that don't connect at all. And so education seems to be the key.
promote economic development.
Yes.
That was another one of your talking points.
Yes, I love that one. And I love it especially because of my passion for rural Arizona. You know, we are a cornucopia of self-reliance, and I'd like to see us, for myself a supervisor, but all of the supervisors join in how we can grow what we already have. For example, we're a $35 million a year industry in viticulture alone. So what are the ways in which we can begin to incentivize it so that it grows? You know what it does? You know, it allows us to keep that open space and still have robust economies. I love the idea of folks coming up here, enjoying our good wine, and going home.
Hopefully they're not driving far.
They can buy the wine, put
And
it
take
in
it home, right.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
They can have that experience up
Right.
here of our extraordinary environment, hike in our forests, come to Lake Watson, and go home, and be back in the city where they want to be. And we have maintained this great legacy we have inherited. So those are the kind of economies, whether it's in small cattle ranching, whether it's in that 600 acres of produce in the Middle Verde, where we have an opportunity to divert money from, I don't know, a road to nowhere,
Yeah.
to
We're going there, by the way.
a cannery, so that our farmers can can their own produce up here, and we can attract the folks from the great state of Maricopa County to come up and buy Verde Valley grown, Verde Valley made, and go home after a wonderful weekend of wine tasting and buying and produce and all of the wonderful things that Steve Ayers, as economic developer of Camp Verde, talks about, and he should be very proud of what's grown in that Camp Verde, Middle Verde area. I'm very, very proud of it, and I'm going to work very hard to advocate for those robust economies which are already there. We just need to encourage and provide ways for them to grow through this COVID period into a robust future, along with the entrepreneurial, innovative, work from home wizards that we have. We need to attract young families to stay in our Verde Valley. We're not doing that. We're not doing a very good job of it. But think about this. If we had a cannery, just as an example, for all that produce we're growing, why, we could have workforce development. We would be attracting young families up to our area that are still having children, and our schools wouldn't be closing like they are now. They'd be opening. We could partner with Yavapai College. I see nothing but opportunity.
Lots of opportunity,
Yes.
I agree with you.
Yeah.
Let's switch a little bit. I was going to ask one more question, but I think time-wise, we're running a little bit long.
Sure.
One of the things I'm very passionate about is the Second Amendment. I believe, strongly in it. I wanted to hear from you. Where do you stand on the Second Amendment? And could you define what the Second Amendment is, in your opinion?
Well, certainly I support what our founding fathers did. I'm a card-carrying concealed weapon permit owner and have a variety of guns. We were talking a little bit about it, but before the show, I didn't get to tell you all of it. And Red Dot Laser especially asked me about that after the show. And I absolutely support the right to bear arms. But let me say this. Let me be very clear.
That's where I was going.
I don't think we can improve upon our Constitution. And I urge us to take any consideration for changing it very, very seriously. And I don't support changing what our founding fathers did, what I think is a brilliant job of.
Well, when I say define it, a lot of people say, yes, I believe in the Second Amendment, and I think everybody should own a flintlock. My question to you is, when I speak of the Second Amendment,
Sure.
do you support, our semi-automatic rifles that we see? Do you support owning magazines that hold more than 10 rounds? Where do you stand on that?
Well, as a hunter, I'll tell you, it has scared the bejesus out of me to have people who think they are hunting and what they are doing is shooting. And I'm sure you have had that experience. And I don't think we use military weaponry to go hunting, one. Two, I don't think we have to assume that individuals need military weaponry in order to have the right to bear arms. And so we need to look very closely at what's happening. As you just said, boy, this society has changed a lot. People are really kind of scary out there now. So I want us to look very closely at what the right to bear arms intention was, and whether we're doing a good job and a fair job to keep our society safe by not stopping someone who has a severe mental illness or emotional illness or an abuse issue from walking in, buying a gun and a magazine that can wipe out Gatling gun fashion innocent members of our community. Something needs to be addressed. We need to make our laws that are on the books effective, or look at how we can change them. I'm not interested in toying around the edges or at the heart of our Constitution. It's worked well for us.
But you are on the Second Amendment. If you're putting in your opinions on what the Second Amendment means,
yes,
then is that not moving things around on it?
You can play with that if you want to, Glenn. You know, I've made my statement, and I support again.
Well, believe me, after we're done talking on the show,
We're
we'll
gonna
kind
talk
of hit
more.
on that a little bit more.
Good, and I'd be
Because I
open
don't,
to it.
because again, and this isn't Glenn talks, but
Sure.
I don't believe the Second Amendment was made to protect deer or anything like that. I think it was to protect the country. And
Yes.
if we're going to protect a country,
Right.
if I'm going to protect a country, I'd rather have a semi-automatic rifle
Yes.
than a revolver. You
Yes.
see, because I have a protection for it myself. But that's where I'm coming from.
And I hear you on that. And I think our military, our militia, should have every weapon available to protect our country.
Okay. Verdi Connect, that's where we're going to go on.
Last but not least.
Yeah, well, no, not quite last, but we're
Okay,
close.
okay.
Verdi Connect, the road to nowhere.
Well, you said it right there. The road to nowhere. It is not supported by the Yavapai Apache Nation, by Jerome, by the town of Camp Verde wrote a resolution in opposition to it that stands to this moment. The Middle Verde community has a 900-member petition in opposition for it. One has to question what the public process was and why in the world it's being located where it's being located. And frankly, I want to ask that question of all of our viewing audience. Please ask, why there?
Yeah.
What is it is really doing? You know, none of that bill grant goes to mitigating the no shoulders that presently exist on the Middle Verde Road. That's a hazard in and of itself. We have such great needs, Glenn, for maintenance. Cornville Road needs maintenance. I know a lot of people are going to say, oh, don't say that word. Roundabouts probably could mitigate some of our traffic issues. We're going to have to bite the bullet, speaking of bullets, and do that pretty soon, whether we like it or not. We have potholes that need to be filled. I am scared to death that we're going to get this free coupon for $25 million for a bridge and not understand that on either side of that bridge are going to be upwards to $100 million. And where do you think that money's going to come from? It's going to come from our taxpayers, and it's irresponsible, particularly now. But beyond the cost thing, and that's got to be what drives all of our decisions at this moment in our history, in our life cycle of our community, the lens of COVID. But for sure, where is the public process? You know, I'm running because I'm a process person. That ought to be pretty obvious to you. And if the community feels they were left out, who am I as a supervisor to say, you had your chance? No, you weren't. That's poppycock.
Yeah.
We need to re-engage then until a satisfactory solution has been reached. Not my satisfaction, your satisfaction. I work for the taxpayers.
And when I first learned about this, it was from Wiley Klein, and then the other gentleman I had on, his name suddenly slipped my
Oh,
mind.
James Gregory.
Not Gregory, it was the cattle rancher.
Harry Oberg?
No.
Zach Wolf.
Zach
Wolf, of course.
Zach Wolf.
Yeah, Zach Wolf.
Yeah, so it took me a couple
Absolutely.
minutes. Sorry,
Sure.
Zach. I remember you though, brother.
I'm there.
But I never, again, sometimes we don't look at what's happening on the other side of the mountain.
Right.
And all this stuff affects all of us who live in Yavapai County.
Very important to know.
We have 5 supervisors,
Correct.
and each one of them have their own little projects, and every one of those costs us,
All of us.
money
That's right.
to do. And
That's
I want to emphasize a little bit on what you just said. There was a grant for a bridge, which was 25 million.
Correct.
And that grant, of course, doesn't come from the taxpayer base.
Right.
But the roads on both sides of that grant
By golly.
are going to be the burden of
That's right.
our taxpayers.
That's right. That's right.
And again, I know it's controversial, like the jail, but was there ever a vote? Was there ever a question? I know we have a representative government. I get that. But does our representative government, are they listening to us?
Well, there's the question. Are
And-
they listening? As evidenced in decisions by my opponent, I have to say no. It is why I am running. I served on his steering committee to get him elected. This was not an easy decision for me to make. It broke my heart to see that the legacy of this great state and Verde Valley in particular was not, in my opinion, being honored and protected by the decisions he's making. Hence, I threw my hat in the ring.
Yeah.
So we must listen to our constituents. We must engage in a process. And when they say, that's not an alternative we will choose, and just because the build grant requires that you have to fit it this way or you don't get it, the word is, Mr. Supervisor, Miss Supervisor, don't go for it then. And the poppycock statement that, oh, if we don't accept it, if we turn it back, we'll never get another grant again, is absolutely erroneous. It's a mischaracterization. For one, you would have a pretty good legal standing to say you can't discriminate against a community because of a decision that was made back there. Mm-hmm. You have to weigh the merits of funding with federal dollars based on what is presented to you. That's called due process. And so all of the scare tactics that have been used to quiet the public, I find most unfortunate and an inappropriate use of position.
So this road, as I understand, is going through places that aren't developed yet.
It is
so
the
I'm gonna kind of put a scenario in.
Please.
So if you build this nice, beautiful road by the taxpayers, mm-hmm. those people who own the property and they may want to develop that later on, isn't that kind of a thank you, taxpayers, for giving me some infrastructure
sure.
to build my homes?
It absolutely is.
Are these people not developers that live on or that own the property on both sides of this road? I know we're kind of getting into a tricky situation, but I'm reading this thing, and again, I'm pretty blunt. I'm thinking, you know what, this looks like a very good opportunity to give a little slap on the back of some developers who may want to build in that area.
So, when it looks like a duck, I can't.
Did it hit a nerve?
Yeah, I won't speculate.
Yeah.
It would be ill-advised for me too.
Yeah.
But I find it most unfortunate that this great open space around where this bridge is going to be has a potential for grave negative impact to an important economic vertebrae in our economic backbone of the Verde Valley, especially in light of the fact that it's not doing what the claims are for the money, which is mitigating traffic in a significant way. As Zach has said, and others as well, it gets you 7 minutes faster to the bottleneck in Sedona. Mm-hmm. Who cares? Mm-hmm. And moreover, there are a couple hundred families that live on that Middle Verde area, most of them farmers and ranchers. And to imagine now going to 4,500 cars a day on this rural road that was never built with the intention of that kind of burden. And by the way, the build grant, as I said, is not going to address that road that presently exists at all. You talk about health and safety hazard. And of course, at this moment, there's no obligation nor willingness on the part of Camp Verde to do anything to that road as a result of being forced to have something they don't want to have.
So my point to the folks that might listen to my show mm-hmm. that have not heard about this project before,
yes.
Where can they go to maybe learn more about this, Donna?
Good question. Well, you go two places. One is the county, because they have a website, and there's lots of information, frankly, that's pretty damning about the decision process and the process itself. and the outcome of it right on the county's website. But you could also go to Verde Disconnect, which is the group that's been led by Todd Scantleberry, one of the farmers who he and his wife, along with others, founded the Verde Valley Farmers Market some almost 20 years ago. And do a fabulous job of growing very healthy, wonderful produce that I buy every weekend that I can. And Zach Wolf, who's a cattle rancher, small cattle rancher, that I've spoken about before. So they created this website.
Is that a website or a Facebook site?
It's a website.
Okay.
So it's verdidisconnect.com. If you just Google that, you can get there and learn a lot more about it, including the NEPA study. While it did clear the minimum marks, let me say to you that it breaks my heart to imagine, and I've seen the photographs, entire intact skeletons, that they're going to mitigate the oldest so far found settlement here in our area, our broad area, by removing them and storing them someplace, instead of making that, at the very least, an extraordinary sacred ground and museum.
Unfortunately, we're destroying a lot of our ancients, and that's happening here in the Dells, and it's happening in your area. So I'm getting the signal that we better start wrapping this up, or we're going to run out of batteries. So again, Donna, I hope you'll come back.
It'd be my pleasure.
Let's talk a little bit more, and maybe we'll drill down more in the jail. We'll drill down a little bit more in the Verde. I wanted to, at least get those out. But a couple other questions I have for you, and I know you're not a partisan, you're running as a Democrat.
I am.
And my question to you, Donna, is when I talk to you, you sound like you have some very conservative views. Why did you choose to run as a Democrat? Why did you go into a Democrat versus being an independent or maybe another party?
At the heart of my life and my life's work and what I'm published in and what I've taught, it has to do with social policy. How can we better the common good? What is it that makes a healthy society? And what role do we as individuals, but also as government, play in that? And certainly the Republican Party has much, being the party of Lincoln, to contribute to that. And I have the greatest respect for those founding tenets. What seems to fit most right now, given our environment and time, is not independent. Though I could be cast in that light as well. I could be a Teddy Roosevelt Republican, an independent, certainly because I evaluate on a case-by-case basis. But for now, and my ability also to run against my opponent, it made the most sense strategically to do, and I'm glad I made that choice. And I stand by the platform of social justice as well. It means a great deal to me that we do something about changing the 1 in 4 children in our country that go to bed at night hungry, that we do something about addressing equal opportunity in education, that we really get serious, especially in Arizona, about funding education and workforce development, that we, at long last, put our money where our mouth is about serving our veterans, which I feel very strongly about. I've founded a Veterans Equine Therapy Alliance that operates out of Jackpot Ranch in Camp Verde, as a matter of fact, to serve our veterans, because we are not doing it adequately. So those are social justice issues that mean a great deal to me, and that align more comfortably at this time in our history with the party platform.
Gotcha. Now, the rumor control out there said that you were a Republican first, and then you went over to a Democrat.
I was, yes. So. I've been a Republican. I've been a Democrat. The only one I haven't been is an independent, because I didn't see how it could fit anywhere. You can't decide what you're going to do. So, I'm pretty clear on how I feel about things. But I do think an independent plays a significant and important role in our today's environment. And for that reason, I look forward to working with our independents as well. We have got to get out of this partisan gridlock that we find ourselves in and realize that we are at a time in our history where we're going to have to find where the commonalities are to push through on the issues where there are no commonalities. And we need to do that sooner than later.
So we have a website for
Yes,
you,
thank you. DonnaForDistrict3.com.
and a Facebook site.
Donna for District 3, absolutely. Very easy to remember, and if you go to DonnaForDistrict3.com, you'll actually see a video show, moderated by a wonderful moderator by the name of Hava, who does interviews much like you do online. And Zach and Todd are on there about the Verde Connect. I also have a community conversations interview with Hava about what makes a healthy community. And so there's a lot on that website that will tell you who I am. And I invite you to go to DonnaForDistrict3.com. Don't forget to donate. And learn a little bit more about why it's important, one, to vote, and two, to consider me seriously as your candidate.
So people who want to maybe ask you a question or something, what would be the best venue?
Either or, but I think it'll get routed directly to me. My Director of Community Activities is sitting in the studio with us today, Matt Werner, and he is highly competent in making sure that those things get put in front of me.
Great, Donna. Well, I'm going to let you do your final word. This is your camera.
Great.
Let the people know why they should vote for Donna Michaels for District 3.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity, one, to run for this office. It's an important office because it's an office that affects everything we do as a citizen from the time we wake up in the morning to the time we go to bed. Whether it's the roads we drive on, whether it's the water we drink or don't have to drink, whether it's the kind of community we live in. What's the vision that you have? What's the vision that we can share together? And that as supervisor, I pledge to protect. I love this Verde Valley. I love Yavapai County and this state. It is why I'm running, and I'll ask you for your serious consideration and vote, if not by early ballot, no later than November 3rd. Together, we can grow the future we came here to live and enjoy, or that we inherited. And I commit the rest of my life to that. I appreciate your consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, Donna. And as always, I'd like to thank our current and prior serving military for your service, giving us the opportunity that we can sit here and make these choices and speak freely and enjoy our constitutional rights. I also always like to thank our law enforcement and our fire department for keeping our streets safe. Without you, we would have full chaos, and we thank you so much. And I also like to dedicate the show to one of my friends, Joe Thrasher, who's sitting in the audience with me. He was my best man at my wedding. He's been my friend since elementary school. He is a retired sergeant for Newport Police Department. I'm so glad that he was able to sit here and watch me go through and fumble away here. So with that, Prescott, thank you so much. We'll talk to you next time.